Everyone. Welcome to the last video of our 2023 Winter Zoom embroidery series. We're going to be doing a very basic introduction to traditional Japanese Sashiko embroidery today. Let me just start by saying that I know very little about this type of embroidery. I have learned a lot in theory from the internet, but I don't have a lot of practice with this technique. So I'm going to give you some basic tips and show you the basic technique. You know the stitch, it's just the running stitch, which I like to say is just sewing. It's up and down, up and down, up and down. When we have done it in the past, the technique here is different, and that is what I'm going to show you. It uses a little bit of a different needle. So in your kit, if you got a kit from me, you have a Sashiko needle. Yours may not be this long. They were in varying lengths in the package that I got. But just to show you in comparison, here's the regular embroidery needle that we've been using. The Sashiko needle can be a lot longer and a lot thicker. They come in different sizes, just like all sewing needles. I gave you denim in your kit, so I got thicker, longer Sashiko needles. If we were sewing on silk, you probably wouldn't use a needle this thick. I am going to be using regular 6-strand embroidery floss, all 6 strands. That is so that you can see it. That is a fine thread to use for Sashiko. If you came and picked up thread at the library, it looks like this, and you can see that this embroidery floss is much thicker. This Sashiko thread, it looks like it's about 2 strands wound together. Again, Sashiko thread comes in all different thicknesses, and that can vary depending on what type of material you are using it for. This is a thin thread that I gave you in your kit. So again, if you don't have a kit, a regular embroidery needle is just fine. Just pick the longest one you've got. And if you don't have a long one, that's fine. You can use a short one. The other difference with this technique is that we're not going to be using a hoop. So if you have denim, just cut a piece. We're just going to be doing a practice. This isn't a full project like we've done in the past in this session of classes. We're just going to be doing a practice. This is not going to be anything pretty that you're going to want to hold on to. So a scrap of denim is great. If you don't have denim, a scrap of cotton fabric is fine. Just grab something random. It doesn't matter. I chose denim because it's very popular right now to do visible mending with Sashiko stitches. It's also a little bit thicker and denser. So for those of us that aren't used to working without a hoop, I find it a little bit easier to work with something a little bit thicker and stiffer that holds, that has a little structure to it. So that's why I picked denim, but it's certainly not necessary. We are going to be working with the same length of thread that we're used to, that is shoulder to fingertip. And I am going to show you how to do a no knot method to start this out, but you can also just tie a knot and do it like normal. Before we jump into the actual stitching, I'm just going to show you, Sashiko is traditionally done in geometric patterns with that running stitch, so it's a dotted line. These patterns are free from the internet in a solid line, and then you would stitch that running stitch over them. So what you end up with is, this is a very nice one. This is a great example. Sorry, my picture quality is not great. But you're going to end up with this dotted line in these geometric patterns. So first things first with the Sashiko stitch is that you want your stitch length to be 2 to 3 times longer than the space in between your stitches. So we've often worked with saying the stitch length and the space between are the same. For Sashiko, you want to have 2 to 3 times bigger, and that can be whatever size you want. This is a little bit big for a traditional stitch. I'll show you a pencil here so you can see how big this is. So you can go a little bit smaller than that, but like for this practice, just do whatever's comfortable. This stitch is really easy to do and a little bit difficult to do well. So let's not aim for perfection today, but ideally you are going to be aiming for stitches and spaces that are this proportion to each other. Another thing to think about is, see this space here, this nice sort of circular space in the pattern? That is aesthetically, traditionally what you're going for. You don't want to have stitches overlapping each other. You want to have them line up very symmetrically. These two sort of meet in the same way. If you've got 2 rows, they don't have to be like this. That's, as my understanding is, that doesn't have to be the case. They can be staggered. Um, but you don't want to have this like crisscrossing situation in the middle. You want to leave these spaces here. So here is an example of ideally what you don't want to do. This is kind of messy in here, and you'll notice that like over here, these gaps in between are about the same size as the stitches. This over here has this sort of awkward, this comes down and then this sort of kind of overlaps it. You want to just try to aim for more of a, this would ideally be like this, as opposed to what this is, which is sort of like that. So good, less good. But again, that's not what we're going to get today because we're brand new to this. And the other thing is, we're not going to get into these intricate patterns here. You can buy kits that have the patterns pre-printed on them, and they even put the stitches, like the patterns are like this. And I think that's a great idea because it helps you get sort of the muscle memory down for figuring out how long those stitches should be and how long the spaces should be. So if you feel like this is something you really want to get into, I would recommend purchasing one of those kits. They come with needles, threads. Some of them even come with a specialized Sashiko thimble, which is helpful because it's not like a normal thimble. So yeah, those are a great idea. And the other thing I want to show you before we jump in, just some helpful knowledge, is here's an example of a pattern. If I wanted to lay this out on fabric, there's a lot of ways I can do it. I can draw it myself with a ruler and a compass. I'm absolutely not going to get into showing you how to do that. For one, I don't know how. And also we could do a whole class just on laying out patterns. But another thing you can do is you can print out a free pattern from the internet, and you can buy this sort of like carbon paper. It's like chalky on the back. You lay the chalk paper, chalk side down on your fabric. You lay this on top, and then you trace it with a pencil and it lays a chalk line down. I'll include a link in your handout to some of that. I actually got a recommendation from someone who was in class the other night, Bindu, thank you, for one that she's used and has had good luck with. So yeah, so there's a lot of ways to do it. Consult YouTube. There are Sashiko experts out there who know a lot more than I do. And but I'm going to give you the basics on how to hold the needle and how to get started. So here we go. I have my piece of denim, and I have my Sashiko needle loaded up with my thread, fingertip to shoulder length. No knot. Okay. Again, if you want to do a knot, go for it. So what I'm going to do is, we're just working in a straight line today. It helps that my denim has these straight lines right in it. Okay, so here's my straight line. For Sashiko, you are working sideways. Okay, so you are working this way. I'm right-handed, which means I'm going to work from right to left. If you're left-handed, you're going to do this in reverse. I'm already losing my line. Okay, so I'm going to start over here on the right because I'm right-handed, and I'm going to go this way. Okay. So if I'm starting with a knot, I'm going to bring my needle up from the bottom here on the end of my line. I'm going to show you the no knot version. For the no knot version, I'm actually going to start sewing about 1.5 inches in. So I'm sewing this way. So I'm just going to jump right in about 1.5 inches down my line from my starting point. There we go. Remember, there's no knot, so don't pull this all the way through. We're going to leave a tail back here. Okay. So there we go. Now, I am going to now sew backwards towards my starting point, just for this first no knot version. Once I get going, I'm gonna go in the correct direction. So for this now, this method, I want to start showing. Well, this is so awkward. I can't do this with my left hand. I just can't do anything with my left hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn this away from myself like this. I'm going to start my stitching, okay? So this is the method. I'm doing it away from myself just so that you can see for the no knot version, okay? This method, we've got this long needle, and what you do is you load up a bunch of stitches at once. I'm only going this 1.5 inches. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tug on my fabric. I'm actually tugging my fabric, not my needle. So it makes it a little easier to get that needle through. All right. Now, here's my first few stitches. No knot over here. Okay. I'm going to turn this over now. I'm still dealing with getting started with no knot. So what I'm going to do is you already know how to do this. I'm going to go ahead and do a woven stitch on the back. I'm going to lead with the eye of my needle. I'm going to go under this little stitch. And I will go back the other direction on this one. I'm going to go, okay, so I just had 2. Now I'm going to come back over here to my line. I am now going to be working in the correct direction, right to left. And I'm going to come back. I'm going to find the spot where I want to come up. And remember, you can already see here, I'm trying to have my stitch length be 2 to 3 times longer than the space between my stitches. Find the right space to come up. Oops. Okay, I'm being very gentle when I'm pulling on this because I don't want to gather up my stitches. So now I sewed backwards, I wove through, I came back through the fabric, okay? No knot. This is nice and smooth if I'm using like a silk fabric and I don't want a heavy knot that's going to make a lump on the fabric, or if I'm sewing this on my pants and I don't want to have a knot that's scratchy against my skin. Either way, that is a reason to sew with no knot. So I'm turning this over here and I wanted you just to see this. Now I really am tugging on this, which is not a great thing to do, but I want you to see this is secure. This is not coming anywhere and I don't have a knot. So now I'm ready to go. The rest of until I run out of thread for the rest of this, I'm just going to sew right to left because I am right-handed. Now, here's the method. Got my needle. You kind of saw it when I did it on my knot, but I'm going to take it even further. I'm going to go in here, smaller space underneath, and I'm just going to gather up my fabric on this needle. Now, if you go watch a YouTube of someone who knows what they're doing, they're going to be real fast at this. It's pretty impressive to watch. I'm not good at I don't have that muscle memory built up to know how long my stitch length should be. But the folks who have been doing this for years, they just, and their stitches are super even. That is not how it goes for me. Very much a Sashiko newbie. I'm going to go the entire length of this line because I've got this long needle and I can do that. Oh, hello, dog. That was the dog saying hello. All right, so you can see I'm just gathering this all up. Okay. Now, that's a lot of fabric on my needle, and I could even go longer if I wanted to. Depending on the thickness of your needle, on the thickness of your fabric, on the strength of your hand, you may or may not be able to now push this through. I recommended that you had a wine cork. This is a great way you can push with your wine cork. You can also put your needle down on the table and sort of push down on it. You can hold on to your needle here and, like I said before, tug on the fabric instead of trying to really wriggle your needle through. So I'm going to use that method. I am going to pull on the denim and just hold my needle still. Switch hands here because I'm not strong enough. Okay, my eye is stuck. I'm so close. There it is. I got it. Okay. Pull this. Okay. Gentle, 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 because what I don't want to do is then gather my fabric up on my thread. It was fine to gather my fabric up on my needle. I don't want to gather it up on my thread. So now that I've got this whole line of stitching done here, I'm going to take my fingers and gently push the stitches outward to make this nice and smooth. So now I have my first line of stitches. Not too shabby, not too shabby. Okay. Now, I'm going to turn the corner and go back the other way. Here's the pen. So let's say I want to do another line of stitches, a little parallel row here. Okay. I want to turn under the fabric. I don't want to have that stitch on top. So I'm going to go, if I was working on a pattern, I would be like, uh-oh, I shouldn't have come to the end. But guess what? I'm not. So I can just do this. I'm going to go one more stitch length. And then I'm going to come over here to the start of my other line. Let's say that goes here. Now there's this, when you turn in Sashiko, we're going to do it differently than we've learned how to do it in previous classes. I'm going to come through here. Now, the way we've learned to do it is that you never want loops of thread on the back of your fabric because you can get caught up in them. In Sashiko, it's the opposite. You actually want a little loop of fabric. This gives us a little wiggle room for when we are pulling our next line of thread tight. So this may get pulled a little bit tighter. It may not, but this gives us room to not end up with a gathered up piece of fabric. So leave a little loop-de-loop here. Not necessarily big enough to put your finger under, but big enough to get your needle under. All right. So now, because I want to be working right to left, I'm now going to just turn my fabric upside down, and I'm going to do another one. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add, and I think for practice is not a bad idea, add yourself a little curve in here. You can trace something round. If you've got a cup or something sitting around, give yourself a little curve to practice on. And I'm going to do this one more time so you can see it. But what we've done here is basically Sashiko. So it's just a matter of practice, 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 getting those stitches even, and then working with these more intricate patterns. So here I go. Again, we're not working with a hoop, so that allows us to just gather this up. When I was working with that straight line, I can go all in one go. Like you saw me do this whole line all gathered up on one needle. I'm not going to be able to do that when I hit this curve. Through a little straight line here, so I'm just going to use this smoothing method. Okay, still got my little loop on the back. That worked out. Okay, now I'm going to do my curve. If I was doing a pattern that had a lot of curves on it, say this one, I might choose to use a shorter needle. This needle's really, really good for long lines because it's so long, but it might make it a little bit awkward for trying to turn. So you might, when you buy Sashiko needles, you can buy them in a pack where they come in different lengths. So like everything, all tools have their purpose. So this one here is great for lines, maybe not as good for curves. But again, I can just follow this curved line, and I'm just sort of steering by moving my fabric. I'm going to try to do it in one and see what happens. I don't know. Again, I'm pretty much learning along with you here on this Sashiko. All right, now this is where I want to think about, I don't want my stitches to run into each other here. I'm going to put that down there. I'm going to end on the back. Gentle, gentle. Hey, I did it all on one. Pretty good. Okay, so now if I wanted to continue that circle, I could do that. And I would want to have my needle come up right about here. And I would continue that so that I don't have a crisscross of my threads right there. So what I'm going to show you now is how to finish off with a no knot method. Okay, so what I'm going to do, let's say I'm all done or I've run out of thread. I only have a couple inches of thread left. I'm going to do the exact same thing I did over here, but I'm going to do it. There's a couple of ways that you can do this. I've seen two different methods for finishing off. One of them is the same. It's the woven method. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back a few times. Okay, might as well do it enough, give myself some, I've got the thread length to be able to do this extra time, so I'm just going to do it. Okay, now you could have this be the end of it. This makes me a little bit nervous, I'm not going to lie. So I'm going to combine the methods. The other method that I saw was to do some double stitches. So I'm going to do double stitches after my weaving. I'm coming up at the end of a stitch here, and I can see that here. And then I'm going to come back down, trying not to split my threads here. Okay. I'm going to do 2 of these. I'm going to come back up. I'm not even looking on the other side. You might want to look. I'm just going to do this. Okay, so you can see I'm working on the back here, right? So I'm going to flip this over and see what happened. Okay. Can you tell that these are double stitches? You can, but if I had a whole bunch of stitching over here, every once in a while to have these 2 little ones that are a little bit thicker wouldn't be a big deal. So now I've not only woven this through, I've locked my my thread back into the fabric by doing a stitch. I'm going to do a couple more. Look, I'm being overly cautious here, but I just want to show you these methods. Okay, weave that back in. And that is that. That's locked in. That's not going anywhere. Okay, so that is the very, very basics of Sashiko. And I just want to show you one more thing that I started to show you when I got distracted. If you are working with a big pattern like this, you can see that this pattern, can you tell that this pattern, if I were drawing it out myself, is just made up of a series of circles. So these straight lines here are just the grid. The pattern itself is just circle, circle, circle. So I would just be stitching the circles. All right, you don't want to stitch a circle and then jump over here and stitch a circle, and then you could do this, but then you're stuck, and then you would have to go over here and stitch a circle. You're going to have a lot of messy threads on the back. You're going to be wasting threads. So when you lay out your pattern or you start, before you get going, think about what is the most economical way for saving thread and being neat with this to sew this pattern. So what you can do is you can find continuous lines. Even though I drew this pattern out with circles, that's not the way I'm going to sew it. I'm going to sew it, let's say I start here. I'm going to find a long line. I'm going to go like this. I'm going to do my Sashiko running stitch like this. Continue on. I'm going to do this. I'm going to come back here. Okay, great. Now I've ended here. Now maybe I can go like this. Okay, so just think about when you are doing this, where's the best place to start and finish your lines of stitching? So I forgot to mention that part. There's going to be a handout that will follow. It's going to have links to Sashiko books in the Minuteman library system. It's going to have links for that tracing paper that you can buy on Amazon if you want to do your own patterns. Amazon and just the internet in general have a bunch of kits. If this is fun for you and you want to really get into it, start with one of those kits. But yeah, there's like the Sashiko is very, very popular. So if you want to get a library book on it, you can learn how to do those pattern transfers and all of that. Or again, YouTube is such a great resource for this. So thank you all so much for doing embroidery with me all winter long. I am planning another session for next winter. So you'll be hearing from me in October or November about doing this again next year. And yeah, happy stitching. Bye.